As all of us watched in horror, as once again we saw an attack, this time a terrorist attack in the city of New Orleans, and then we saw the bomb that went off in Las Vegas, and two different incidents and two different conversations. But we're going to have it with my friend Steve Hooper, who is here. Thanks for coming in.
You got it, Mike.
Let's talk about your experience for somebody. If you don't know Steve, Steve was with the FBI for over 30 years. You're now a professor at Embry-Riddle School of Security and Intelligence. And so you are teaching the next generation about what's happening today, what we're seeing.
Yeah, and incidents like this just gives me subject matter for my classes because we're preparing that group.
So when you saw this, when the news, and I always think of you when I see these things because I am just like a civilian. I'm watching them through civilian eyes. The tragedy, what did they know? What should they have known? That kind of questions. I know you have a different perspective. You were the ASAC here in Phoenix. You've been involved in a lot of these big events and you've done a lot of these things. What did you notice or what have you learned from what you've seen and what we know?
Well, we were all shocked by the lack of security, the security posture of the city of New Orleans. This is a city that went through Katrina all those years ago, and you would think their preparedness level would have been much higher for any kind of event. We can talk about what I go right to because of what I teach up at the CBSI, which is our college, the College of Business, Security, and Intelligence, the CBSI. What we teach about is preparedness. We teach about emergency preparedness and contingency planning and all kinds of cybersecurity, corporate security, and national security measures. And when I see this, I wonder what type of security footprint were they establishing for this event? This is a major college football game. It involves now playoffs and so forth. Now, I know that's a new element out there, but they knew hundreds of thousands of people were coming to their city.
But it's also a city that's known for big events.
Exactly.
Host the Super Bowl. They got Mardi Gras every year. So this is a city that you would think that would be much like ours, which is why I wanted to talk to you about this. We host a lot of big events here. And so you would think that the Valley has gotten good at being prepared for these events. And when you looked at this, was this guy on the radar or should he have been on the radar?
Well, that's a tough call because, so we can break down the national security elements that are out there that are looking at the type guys like this specifically. So getting away from New Orleans and the security posture they established, let's look at, for that question, would have to look at, well, what did the FBI know? What did, I'll say, ICE know? Because he is, so for the FBI, it's broken into two elements now. So there's the investigators, FBI special agents that do the investigation. Well, the FBI also has for lack of a better term, a domestic intelligence capability now. Post 9/11, 2008, it rolled out the first ever national intelligence, the Intelligence Directorate, to assess threats within the country, kind of MI5-like. And so these are the kinds of things they're going to be looking for.
So the videos that this guy had posted online have been pretty recent before the attack. So how fast is the uptake on that? How, normally speaking, for the FBI, if somebody posts that, how quickly do they learn about it?
Well, it depends on if they're looking at him. Maybe he wasn't on their radar, but we all already know that the family knew. He admitted to them that he had joined ISIS. He had been inspired by ISIS. Well, that information needs to get to the national security elements. And so if that information gets to the FBI, then the FBI is built now through the Joint Terrorism Task Forces to do a proactive approach on this type of intelligence. And then the intelligence component, the established intelligence component now, will take that intelligence and see if it marries up with intelligence coming from other agencies, other field offices within the FBI. So this guy got the truck in Houston. He has ties to Colorado Springs. So the Denver field office, the Houston field office, the New Orleans field office, and the DI, the intelligence, the Directorate of Intelligence at FBI headquarters, are they marrying all this intelligence up and saying, this guy needs to be on our radar. Did any of that happen?
So what happens now when you look at, you've got more playoff games coming up, you've got the NFL playoffs coming up and the Super Bowl. Does this heighten awareness at all of these events now?
Okay, so yes, but understand that a thing like the Super Bowl is already what they call a SEER 1 Special Event Assessment Rating established. There's 5 levels under Department of Homeland Security. SEER 1 and SEER 2, actually in SEER 3, all allow for federal resources to come in and assist at different levels.
And isn't it true that in these scenarios, when you look at these events as they're happening, as unfortunate as it is to think about these things, don't they go through scenarios and say, if this happens, this is how we react, up into and including canceling or postponing the event?
Oh, yeah. So again, it's a SEER 1 event. The Super Bowl will be a SEER 1 event. We've been through many of those here in the Valley. And that establishes who does what and what triggers the next response. And if there was a significant threat to the Super Bowl, yes, it would include shutting it down and making sure that that you have a great security blanket over the Valley.
And that's it's horrible to talk about these things, but the way it was described to me is, a scenario happens during the week of the Super Bowl with all the festivities. There is a car bomb that explodes in the tunnel. That triggers a response, and it triggers, so you practice these events. Are you saying that when it came to New Orleans that possibly they weren't as prepared as they should have been for this event?
Well, clearly they were not. So again, using Phoenix, using the Valley, the Super Bowl itself, the game is in Glendale. But all the events leading up to it, for the most part, are in downtown Phoenix.
Yeah,
the
convention
NFL
center.
event
Yep.
and the media rooms and all that. So right away, you've got 2 of the biggest cities in the Valley involved. But you've got DPS involved. You've got the FBI involved. You've got the Secret Service involved. Secret Service, believe it or not, is the lead agency, the lead federal official for all SEER 1 events. The Secret Service, with the minimal resources they have, they're designated as the lead federal official. So they can't help but reach out to other federal agencies to support. And so when you have an event of that size, whether it's New Orleans, a small city with a significant event, where are all the other local agencies being brought in to support like we do in the Valley routinely?
But when you look at this, and I'm not asking you to point a finger and blame one specific person, but if the bollards aren't in place in New Orleans, that seems like a city failure. But if that is a security fault or risk, then it would seem like the oversight that's coming in, Secret Service, FBI, and the advisors would say, you've got to get that fixed before we do any of this. Is that how that works?
Well, yes. In general, yes. But what would happen is you'd do essentially what we call a tabletop exercise, a TTX, beforehand, and would throw out what if. And an agency would raise their hand and say, we can handle that. Well, what if this that would be an FBI thing. Okay, what if a guy brought in a truck, vehicle-borne IED, and was bringing it into the area? Okay, ATF, we've got the ability on the explosives. Okay, the city of New Orleans, it's your job to protect the streets and sidewalks and put up what resources you have. Okay, what resources do we have? This is how you dive deep into the resource allocation and who handles what. And it seems like they just said, another big event in our city, let's go.
So you can spend one more segment with me. I want to dive into a little bit more of this and then talk about what happened in Vegas. All right, Steve Hooper has joined me. Steve Hooper is a professor at Embry-Riddle School of Business, Security, and Intelligence, and it's really the only school like it. And I want to talk a little bit about that if we have time, because it's such a great program, training the next generation. We could go down the road of the cyber attacks and how good China's gotten and what they've done, but I want to focus more on these terror things. Just to kind of wrap up what's gone on in New Orleans, hosting the big events that we do and is connected to the Phoenix area as you've been for a long time. Nobody is 100% immune from anything, but it seems like the Valley does get it right. The way the agencies work together, the federal oversight, the JTTF, Would you say that the Valley does a pretty good job of taking these issues and making sure they're as secure as they can be?
Oh, yeah. I've been involved in 2 Super Bowls before I retired, and they do an amazing job. I mean, I talked a little bit about a tabletop exercise, and that kind of minimizes what it is we do for the Super Bowl, but it was an auditorium full of agencies to discuss who was going to do what if X, Y, or Z happened. And so the Valley does an amazing job, and that's because we learned over and over from the different Super Bowls. And plus, again, going back to the SEER ratings, those become important. That's a SEER 1 event, which opens the door for all federal resources to assist the Valley, the multiple city agencies and state police that are involved.
So what happened in Vegas, where it looks like a special forces soldier was, by accounts, are now saying that he was suffering from PTSD, but he sets off a car bomb out in front of the Trump Hotel in Las Vegas. Different in a lot of ways from what we saw happen in New Orleans. How was that handled and assessed differently by federal agencies? How do they see this differently?
Well, because of the timing, you're immediately going to check and see if it's connected to the New Orleans attack, and because there was a connection with the base they served on and the time they were in the military and so forth. I think the latest analysis of it has shown that this guy just he was trying to bring attention, awareness to the problem with the veterans, the PTSD and so forth, and didn't feel like people. This is a classic, as we talked about in many other things on your show, the Jaka effect, where he just felt he was justified in getting someone's attention by doing something. He was going to kill himself and use that vehicle to get people to notice.
If you look online, there's a lot of people that are saying there's no way these two things aren't connected, and it's kind of the conspiracy road. Going back to New Orleans, is the early handling of this with the information that came out with the first FBI ASAC that talked that said this isn't terrorism, that was giving information that wasn't correct, does that feed into some of those conspiracy theories?
Well, any events like this, any incidents, any violent acts like this, the initial reports, the media is going to race to be the first ones to report it. And so they're going to put out that there's potential connections, and then people are going to think what they want to think. And in the world of social media, it becomes reality because they start putting it out on social media that this news station's reporting a potential connection and so forth. So people are going to think what they're going to think. People need to step back when these things happen and wait for the true information to come out. And I believe that the indications are now that obviously there's no connection.
So when it comes to awareness, we've talked about, we just had the Fiesta Bowl here. We've got the Fiesta Bowl parade. We have Barrett-Jackson. We have the WM Phoenix Open. We have major events, Super Bowls. What does the average attendee, somebody that's downtown in Phoenix or someone that's going to be at the Open, how can they feel secure? What do they do to be prepared? I don't want to live in fear. I don't want to be paranoid. But there's a difference between living in fear and being aware. What does the average person need to be looking for?
Well, you know, we can get into soft targets, hard targets, right? The Super Bowl becomes a hard target when let's say when the game starts, because entrances are secured and it's in a solid structure. The soft target is the NFL experience in Phoenix, where people are walking the streets and they have the streets cordoned off. It's hard to protect a soft target. You can turn around and make it a hard target, but I'm not sure you're going to get the numbers to attend if it's going to be a hard target. It's what we talk about. I could make a school so secure it would never be a victim of a school shooting. I'm not sure you'd want to send your kid to school there. But soft targets versus hard targets is what you're talking about. And the Fiesta Bowl parade's a soft target. What do people need to look for? They just need to be aware of their surroundings. There's no hard and fast security posture that a city can put in place to secure a soft target, a parade, an outdoor event of some sort. You just have to be aware of your own surroundings and make those smart decisions.
And so the last question is, you've talked about, going back to the school shooting analogy, you talk about owning the threat. And in this case, if the federal agencies didn't know that this guy had been self-radicalized, but there were family members that did, is there accountability for people that don't speak up and say, he told me he was joining ISIS or he sympathized with ISIS? Is there accountability for people doing that, or should there be?
There is not, that I'm aware of. That would be on a local level, but I don't know or if they could put it as a national security incident that they didn't report it. But there's no mandate to report information you've heard. I would like to think in today's world that if someone even mentioned that they were considering supporting ISIS in some way, that would trigger an immediate phone call to the authorities. But unfortunately, that's not the wasn't the case in this.
You don't want to see a family member jailed, but you also don't want to see them commit a suicide mission like this.
Right. But I can tell you, if that information gets to an FBI's JTTF, which could come through the local police to the police officer, that agency's member on the JTTF. That's why it's built that way. It's multi-agency task force. The FBI JTTFs will follow up on it. They'll immediately send people out and check on this person. So this mechanism is there, but the information has to get to them.
Steve, I always love talking to you. I appreciate the information. I appreciate you coming down, and I look forward to talking to you again.
All right. Thanks, Mike.
Thanks for watching the Mike Broomhead Show. Catch up on Amazing Arizonans, a KTAR News podcast, and click the button in the middle to subscribe.